Okay, so today is December the 4th, 2020, and we're continuing our series on legends of real estate. And so when we talk about legends, these are people who have been there and done that. They've been in the trenches for decades, and they're the very best at what they do when it comes to real estate investing. So please introduce yourself.
I'm Bob Dressman from Cincinnati, Ohio.
And how long have you been investing?
Since 1991.
1991. So these days, what type of investing do you do?
I do a lot of hard money loans. We own some rentals. I sell a lot of properties on owner financing. I do a lot of partnerships with other people to do fix and flips.
Okay, and when you're doing these partnerships, how do you find those people that you're going to partner with?
It's mostly through the network of people I've been dealing with for years and years and years. A lot of them come to me through the hard money lending business, and so if somebody has a down payment and some experience, I'll make them a loan. If they don't have money but they have a deal and have the energy to go do the deal, I'll partner with them and provide some expertise and some money and guidance, and hopefully we both make a nice chunk of money.
What do you look for in somebody? I mean, when you say, okay, I'm going to do a deal with this person, I'll loan this person money or help them with a deal or partner with a deal, what do you look for in that person?
I'm looking for somebody who, number one, has found a deal.
Define deal.
Something that has a high likelihood of achieving a profit. The fun thing about working with other people is they find stuff I would never even think to look for. You know, like typically I'm a single family house guy, but I just did a hard money loan with a guy who bought an old hardware store, converted it into 13 beauty salons, and then rented those out, held on to it. He had bought it as a lease with an option to buy. The guy who he did the lease option with was getting a little squirrely with him, so I helped him buy it, and then we resold it immediately to somebody who was looking for the cash flow. And that would be something that I would have never thought of doing, but he had figured out how to do it. He just needed some help with creating the financial statements and the financial records that somebody who's looking for a return is going to want in order to prove that it has a good cash flow and that they're buying it at a certain cap rate.
And liking the person, how much does that play a part in who you do business?
I don't do business with people that aren't fun, or mean, or we need to work well together. And, if somebody who knows it all or who's not interested in listening, we're not going to play that game. We need to listen to each other because, a lot of times they have more insights than I do. But I have a little more experience and at times may figure out when we may run into some problems and anticipate those a little bit better. So.
How long have you been investing? When did you get into?
1991.
1991.
So that's what, 29 years?
Yeah, a long time. We're actually 30 years coming up on now. So what is your average week? And it's hard to describe because I know you do different things, but kind of what does an average week, maybe you might condense a month down to a week, but what does that look like, a period of time in your normal week/month?
So I typically get up real early in the morning. I go into the office. I do sort of my hard mental thinking and get done the stuff that needs to get done. So I'll typically get to the office 4:30 or 5. And usually nobody's bugging me till about 6:30 or so. And then at that time, my phone starts to ring and people start to stop by, and I sort of, work the deals that show up and do the things that are interesting. And then I'll typically go out and check on a couple of projects on my way home, and most days I shoot to be home by noon or so.
Why so early?
Because nobody bugs me that early. And I'm an early person, and just my brain works better then.
So again, you function best in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
So how would your day look if you function better at night?
I'd reverse things, and I'd talk to people during the day and then do my hard work late at night when nobody was bugging me then.
Cool. What made you become a real estate investor, get into real estate in the first place? Why?
So growing up, I always cut grass at my grandfather's apartment buildings and did maintenance. My uncle managed an apartment building and I did maintenance work there and cut grass there. And I was always interested in it. And the plan was that I was going to go get a real job and then get an MBA and then eventually invest in real estate. But what happened is I got a real job. I got laid off after a year. And earlier that year, I had bought a HUD foreclosure that I was in the process of fixing up and was going to resell. So I then resold that house. But I said to myself, man, that agent that sold me that house made pretty much money and didn't seem to have to do much work. So I went into selling HUD and VA foreclosures. And while I was selling HUD and VA foreclosures, I was dealing primarily with other investors. And so that sort of gave me the chance to see what other people were doing and understand what people were doing. And over time, I'd find stuff that was a good deal that I couldn't convince anybody else to buy, so then I'd buy it myself. And just over time, I bought more real estate and sold less. And all of a sudden, I wasn't a real estate agent anymore. I was a real estate investor. And so that worked well.
Pretty cool. Back then when you were starting off, did you foresee where you would be today? The way you're doing your investing, the way you work, the level of success you had, did you see that?
Oh, no way. I had no idea. And it was sort of one piece at a time. And you learn to do one thing and then you're like, oh, that's cool. Let's go try that and see if that works. And then, over the years, most of the things I've tried have worked terribly. But I found a few that worked well, and I just kept doing those over and over again. And I'm very blessed to have good people that work for me. That if I have to do the same thing too much, I go crazy. But I'll try different things and find something that works, and then once I get something that works, I can have them do it over and over again, and that's where most of the money comes from, is by repeating the same thing.
Okay, so there's 3 levels of investing. You have starter, that's someone less than 5 deals. You have the estate builder. So they're not flippers or wholesalers. They may flip and wholesale, but they're starting to gather the assets. So they're starting to gather the properties because they want their capital working for them versus them working for the capital. And then at a point in time, you're an ender. That doesn't mean you quit or you're dead or you don't do deals anymore. It just means you don't have to. It means you have your capital assets are providing your income level. So let's go back to when you were a starter. The first 6 months. What hardships did you go through and how did you overcome them?
It wasn't hard, it was fun. Life, you should wake up every day and be excited about what you're doing. And so, and I was very lucky in that my wife had a real job that had insurance and we had steady money coming in. So, I could go play with real estate and we could save that money and invest that money over time. And because of the stability that she provided, I could then, ultimately, the thing you have to understand about real estate is it's fundamentally about compounding interest and leverage. And you can't make that work for you unless you have some capital, which means that you have to spend less than you make. And so we were very lucky in that when we got started, her job provided for us. And then I could go, the money I made as a real estate agent and by investing and buying rentals and flipping houses and all the different things that I tried and did, was able to compound over time. And that worked really, really well for us.
What were your biggest hurdles when you were starting?
Learning to talk to people, because I'm very much an introvert. And so because I then went into a sales job, I had never sold anybody anything in my life. And so I had to learn to talk to people. And I had the broker that I was working with was really good at showing me how to learn what somebody's story is. And he always told me that nobody will buy anything from you until you really understand what their story is and how you can help them. And that was, I was impatient at first, but once I learned the patience to really get to know people, there are customers that I sold houses to when I first got started that I still get phone calls from today, and they're asking for help on this or that, or they're interested in investing some money or doing something. And by learning to build those relationships, which was something that I wasn't a big gregarious person who had a million friends in school. So learning to build those relationships was what took me the longest amount of time.
So the fascinating thing to me that you just said was, you are an introvert.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, in the real estate world that we're in, you are known as one of the best question askers in the business. You're able to use questions to dissect and find out and learn better than most anybody else I've ever seen. So how does an introvert go from, because a lot of times an introvert will not ask people questions, they kind of disappear into a corner. How did you learn to become so good at asking those questions and discovering?
So there are two things. Number one, I'm naturally curious, and I want to learn lots of different things. And the other thing is, when I was in high school, I got a scholarship to a Dale Carnegie class. And one of the things in there they said is, one of the best ways...
Wait, when was this?
When I was in high school.
In high school I was in junior achievement.
That's funny.
I got a scholarship
to
the
Dale Carnegie class.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
How about that?
So what Dale Carnegie said is, if you can get people to talk about themselves and ask them questions about them, they're more interested in talking about themselves than they are about learning about you. And so I'm not a big talker, and for me to sit here and talk to you this much is very hard for me.
Yeah.
But when I ask people questions, then they have to be the one who's talking rather than me. And I'm a lot more interested in learning about them than I am about learning about myself, because anything I'm going to say I already know. And so
this is a painful process for you because you're not in control.
Correct.
You're not the one asking questions and directing and...
Well, and I'm talking about stuff that I know about, so I'm not learning anything. So that's not fun.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot more fun to learn new things about people and begin to understand what's going on and what their motivations are and what they want, and figure out a way that I can hopefully help them.
Okay, so when you started off, when you were a starter,
mm-hmm.
you lacked knowledge,
mm-hmm.
you lacked money to do deals,
mm-hmm.
and the know-how to do deals, which is really the knowledge. What made you not quit? Because most starters quit. What made you not quit?
Well, I had a wife and then children that I was accountable to. And so there wasn't a choice as to whether I was going to make it or not. And from like when you're just getting started, all you have is hustle. And you just go out and hustle, and you do what you can, and you chase every rabbit you can get, and then you get something, and then you take that capital and you do something with it. And so you hustle, and then you figure out what services you can provide. So I was a real estate agent.
But why didn't you quit? Because I know you had a wife and all that, but it's easy when, again, you don't have the capital, you don't have the know-how to throw up your hands and say, let me go get this other job where I get W-2 income.
Mm-hmm.
That it's a much easier solution, because when you're out there and you're sitting down at sellers' tables and you're asking the questions and you're like, how do I ever pay for this, or what's a deed? Again, why didn't you quit?
So
what made you different from 99% of the other investors who start, who never do their first deal?
Well, after I got laid off, I had that real job for like 9 to 11 months. And it was the most frustrating thing in the world for me. That, the group of us that were working together, we would sit down in the course of an hour, figure out what we should do. And then it would take weeks or months for us to convince somebody else that we should be allowed to do that. And so I love working for myself because I'm the only one who's responsible for what happens. And when it gets messed up, it's my fault. And I'm happy to take responsibility for that. But I also can be the one who figures out a way to go fix that.
You know, I was about to ask, when you make the mistakes, of which we all make a lot, what's your response to the mistakes? Do you throw your hands and quit?
No, you figure out a way to fix the problem, or you go do something else, or you find something else that's a better way, or you talk to somebody who's, had the same problem before and see what they did, or you research it, or you come up with some idea to figure out a different way to do things. You got to keep going. And, success is a little bit day after day after day after day. But I think it's Jim Rohn that said, the things that are easy to do are also easy not to do.
Yeah, that's Jim Rohn.
And that is so true. And if you just wake up every day and do a few of the right things, day after day after day, you wake up and you're like, man, how did I get here?
So let's move to your middle years. So now you're an estate builder.
Mm-hmm.
So in the beginning, you were doing some flipping, right? You were working as a realtor. So now let's move you to now you're an estate builder. What caused you to move from someone who was just turning properties to now you're starting to acquire and maybe even doing a little bit of lending? I don't know. When did you start lending? Were you acquiring properties first, or did you start lending first?
So initially, basically I'd sell houses, and then I'd finally have enough saved up to be able to buy one. And then I'd rent that house out. And then, I'd save up more money from commissions, or, I'd find something that I could turn around and resell right away. But then, probably towards the late 90s, I figured out how to use IRAs to acquire properties, because Dick Dessage was coming around to all the different RIAs at the time, and I had just been audited a couple of years in a row, and that was just an incredibly frustrating experience, and I got frustrated with having to pay so much in taxes based on being, a real estate agent and having that all be Schedule C income. And I'm like, you mean I can buy these properties in an IRA and do things with them and make money and never have to pay taxes? And I was just astonished. And so that's sort of when I began to do more things. And just what happens is, once you have assets that are bringing in income, if you're not spending that income, you then need to reinvest that money. And it's just this virtuous cycle that keeps things going and going and going. And your job is then to just keep that money deployed at the highest rate of return you possibly can.
As an estate builder, what were your biggest obstacles? It's different than being a starter, because now you have some knowledge, you have some capital, assets capital. As an estate builder going through those middle years, what was the hardest?
It was
things?
really easy. When you first get started, all you have is time. But then as you do get more and more assets, you have to be careful to acquire assets that don't suck up too much of your time. And
give me an example.
A low-end rental property. A lot of times on paper, those are they generate the highest internal rate of return with the capital that you have. But they also suck up a bunch of your time. And so when I first got started, I bought 3 houses for $35,000 with owner financing. And my payments were $319.56 for 15 years. And each of those houses rented out for $700. And when I first got started, that was great money. But it required time, because you had to deal with the Section 8 orders and the low-income tenants moving in and out and doing all those different things. Well, when you start to scale that business, you start to run out of time, and you need to get assets that generate income without as much of your time being involved in them. And so it was a combination of learning to acquire better quality assets and then hire people to help me do the things that I wasn't good at so that I could then replicate that over and over again. And so it was really going from being an investor to then you're a manager and learning how to get people to do what you need them to do, and be happy to do it.
So in other words, you were no longer painting the walls.
I was hiring people, and I was no longer, doing the accounting. I had somebody who was doing the accounting, and and the things that I would do intuitively, I had to learn to explain to somebody else how to do, and then learn how to coach them through doing it right, and then hold them accountable to actually doing it consistently.
We all face, sometimes on a regular basis, the proverbial brick wall. Mm-hmm. Again, what I try to always dig into is it's so easy to quit. And a lot of people I watch, they're right at the point when they're about to cross a very important line, and then they quit because it got hard. So what message do you have for starters and estate builders who are right now, they're beating their head against the wall? Let's talk more about the estate builders where they've done 40 or 50 deals. Mm-hmm. They never have any money in the bank. They're working on rehabs all the time. They're just like, good God, when will this ever hit? What message do you give them to make sure that, what can you tell them so they won't quit? Because they're almost there.
Well, there are times that the best way to figure out where you are is to slow down a little bit. And I see so many of the estate builders that they become addicted to the deal, and they're always working on the next deal rather than realizing, hey, if you just slowed down a little bit and started catching a few balls rather than throwing more and more up in the air, your business would be a lot more profitable. There was one guy who was in one of my mastermind groups who owned 60 houses, but 20 of them were vacant, and he was still buying more houses. And it's, okay, well, the next deal isn't that important, because until you make the deals that you already have work. And yeah, that would be the biggest thing I'd say is, focus on making the deals you have work. And if you do that, you will probably be a lot more successful than you think.
What's it like being an ender? And again, an ender doesn't mean you're dead. It doesn't mean you're not doing deals, because you're doing deals every day. It just means you don't have to, that the money's coming in that you need to live on to your form of life. You're okay. So what's it like for you now being an ender?
I just recently figured out that that's where I was, because when you're so used to building, you don't quite realize that, but it's just sort of, it's fun to wake up in the morning and get to do what you want to do rather than what you have to do, and to be able to take the time. Like we just came down here and hung out with some of our friends for the last week or so and talked about our businesses, and to have the chance to do that and to share things with other people, and probably the funnest thing is just working with new people and letting them learn the skills that I learned from other people years ago. And just to be able to relax a little bit is a lot of fun.
So let's talk about relax a little bit. So you're an ender. How do you like spending your time? This is a big general question. How do you like spending your time? What do you want to do?
I like to be with my wife and children. We love to travel. We just got back from Playa del Carmen. When the whole COVID thing's over, hopefully we'll be traveling more. When
you say travel, do you mean like a 3-day vacation?
Right now we probably travel 8 to 10 weeks a year. Eventually I'd like that to be probably more like 15 or 20 and be able to go places, for 4 or 5 weeks at a time. We can't quite do that yet because we still have kids in school, and our primary job is making sure they get to where they need to go.
Why go somewhere for 4 or 5 weeks?
You begin to understand more what's going on, and you get to go beneath the surface and just understand more things about the world than you ever can being in your own little community.
So you're an ender now. What sacrifices did you have to make to get to today? you have to give to get, would you give?
Absolutely. Well, so, I mean, it's the simple thing, you need to spend less than you make. And so there was a very long time that, and probably that my tenants had better TV sets and nicer cars and nicer stuff than I did, because I would take the money that we made and we'd reinvest it. And, you know, to this day, I pack my own lunch, whereas all the guys that work for me go out and spend $10, $12, $14. And so...
So wait a minute. You pack your own lunch, though you have the financial wherewithal to eat at a really nice restaurant and not hurt yourself financially in the least little bit.
Correct.
You still pack your lunch.
Well, and we buy groceries and cook food, and I mean, and that's healthier, and it's more financially responsible.
And why is being financially responsible important?
I wouldn't be here unless we were. And we have all been given resources, and we're stewards of those resources. And it's important that you take care of the things that you've been given.
All the sacrifices you made to get here, were they worth it? Because at the time, you're looking, going, throwing your hands up there, going, "Holy cow!"
Oh yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people that are my age that if they didn't wake up tomorrow and go to work, they wouldn't have enough money to make their house payment or their car payment or buy groceries next week. Whereas if I didn't get up and go to work, we would. And so just that peace of mind of knowing that you're not on the treadmill anymore is so valuable.
So let's go back to the starters for a second. So a starter is someone who's done less than 5 deals. They're just getting started in real estate. What advice do you have to them?
Be curious and always give more than you take, because the relationships that you develop when you're a starter are going to be what takes you to the next level. And when you give more than you take, in the long run, people keep coming back to you over and over and over again, and you will move infinitely farther than trying to watch to make sure that you get all that you're entitled to.
Okay, so a different frame of mind is going to be for estate builders.
Mm-hmm.
What advice do you give for them? Because they're in the trenches, and then a lot of them have done 20, 30, 40 deals, and it just gets frustrating because your bank account's empty. You know, your wife is, you're driving the old cars, just like you said. You go see your tenants, and the things they have are nicer than what you have, and your family's looking at you going, "Dad." What advice do you have for the estate builders?
Realize that you're farther than you think, but also make sure to keep track of the details, because if you lose the details, that can cost you a lot of money and slow you down on getting to where you need to go. And then also, again, make sure that you're giving more than you're taking with every transaction, both, to the other, to the investors that are getting started that might be helping you find deals. Make sure to help them out. And when you sell somebody something, again, make sure to give them more than they're entitled to, because those people will come back to you over and over again.
My wife has a great saying: "Don't take all the slick off the table. Leave some slick on the table for the next guy."
Yeah. And
who are your best teachers? And this is overall. This isn't just real estate. You can use real estate too, but overall, who have been your best teachers?
Probably my best teacher was my mom, and watching her grow up as I grew up. And so she was a school teacher and never made a lot of money, but spent the summers with us. But we would, growing up, we had enough money to make the house payment and buy groceries, but if we wanted to go on vacation, she had to figure out a way to make some extra money. And so she would always figure out a way to hustle and make some more money. So she would teach an English class to business executives and make good money. One year she wrote a company's financial report even though she didn't understand any of the numbers in it. And so...
Did you just have your mom, or was your dad?
No, my dad had a full-time job working
but it was your mom that you focused on?
Well, my dad got up and went to work every day and was going to always make the same amount of money. Whereas my mom was a teacher, but was also responsible for us and had to figure out a way to make money in between taking care of us. And there were things that she'd want to do, and if she wanted to do those things, she had to figure out a way. So just seeing that, okay, the world doesn't happen to me. I'm in charge of making the world around me happen, was so valuable. That we live in an abundant world, and you can have all that you want. You just have to figure out how to give people value so that they're happy to give you what you want. And just learning to see that has been so valuable over the years.
Okay, how about real estate investing teachers? We'll be more specific there.
So my the broker that I started with showed me a lot about real estate, and he taught me how to talk to people, and that was incredibly valuable.
What was his name?
Skip Adams. And then I joined our local Real Estate Investors Association, and there I would just go and talk to the other people that were in the room and listen to the speaker. And I bought a few courses over the years, but I was never a big course person. I was always more interested in learning about what other people are doing. And I never fully subscribed to anybody's system, but I would take pieces of what everybody did and incorporate it into something that would work for me.
So you could hear your own drumbeat, things that felt right to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so looking back, what'd you do right?
I kept at it. Because that's the thing, is you do a little bit every day and eventually you get there.
What'd you do wrong?
I bought too low of quality assets for too long. It took me too long to realize that I was not a good owner of those low quality assets.
Okay, define not a good owner of those low quality assets.
So I've seen people who are very hands-on, who are going to be the guy who's going to go and take care of stuff and are really good with low-income tenants and can hustle that way. But that was never what I was good at. But on a spreadsheet, it looked like those should be more profitable. But in reality, with my cost structure and the way I interacted with that group of people, it didn't work out so well.
How did you fix the problem? So you had too much low quality houses. What did you do to fix that problem?
I sold those and bought better quality ones.
Okay. Last question.
Okay.
What didn't you do that you wished you would have done? Or maybe something you didn't do right away that you do now, that if you could go back and talk to yourself when you were starting, you're like, hey.
I wish I had gotten more better quality education earlier.
How? From where?
The local RIA. I wished that I knew about some of the people I know about now then, because...
People like whom?
Like Pete and Dykes.
So you're saying Pete Fortunato, Dykes
Botifer. John Schaub, Jimmy Napier. I wish I had been exposed to that group of people earlier.
Because again, when I first heard of you, it was through Vina. And I always kind of patted myself on the back to know who the major players were in the country. And I didn't know you. How did you not know about them?
So what I did is, when I first got started in real estate, I was involved in my local RIA. But then, you know, sort of after the late 90s, we started having kids. And it was just the last thing in the world I wanted to do is, after I had been working all day, I wanted to come home and be with my family. And so I never went to the meetings. And so there was a period of probably 15 years there that I didn't go to any meetings. Well, probably 10 years. And so if I had had better information during that time, I think I would have made better decisions and made fewer mistakes.
Thank you, Robert.
Most certainly.
It's good having you here.
Yes.